Everything Monet did, where he went, the choices he made, it was always to do with his paintings. He sometimes painted portraits. Can you find the portraits of his young sons? Mostly though, the things he painted were the same ones all his life. Water, light, flowers, and places outside where the light was interesting. He tried to stay as faithful as he could to what was actually in front of his eyes, and he hoped that in this way we could see the world in a new way. One watery place he loved very much and painted many times was the River Seine that runs through France. In the early years, he even built a studio in one of his boats. It must have been a bit like a painter's floating cubby house. There are two pictures of the Seine painted from the same spot but at very different times of the day. What do you think Monet is trying to show by painting the same place at different times and in different light? Monet and his family lived in a number of houses near the River Seine. One of the early ones was at Verteuil. When you look at Monet's picture of Verteuil, can you find the church steeple? Their house is just below it. It was during this period when Monet's kids were young and his first wife was sick and he had no money that he started to paint in a new way that eventually made him famous. He would go out day after day. He'd paint many pictures of the same scene, one after another. He'd return again and again at the same time of day to try to capture the same effect of the light. He'd paint fast with thick, fat brushstrokes. This style of painting was part of a new movement called Impressionism, and Monet became one of its masters. Impressionist paintings are as much about the movement of seeing as they are about what is seen. This was new.
I'm hard at it, working stubbornly on a series of different effects.
One thing that helped the Impressionists in their aims was a new sort of paint. Before Monet's time, artists had to grind their paints from solid blocks of colour, but by this time he was working, they could use paint from a tube. This meant that he could paint where he most loved to be, outside. Monet sometimes used only a few colours to make his impressionistic effect. Look at his painting, Field of Yellow Irises, you can see he only used 5 colours. Not many people realise what Monet was aiming for 130 years ago. His picture of Verteuil in the fog was regarded as a failure then, yet Monet knew how good it was. Once, when he was very poor, he tried to sell it, but the person said it was too white. After that, he showed it often, but refused to sell it all his life. The picture of Verteuil, where you can see the church steeple, shows another thing Monet became interested in: how to paint reflections. In this picture, it is the watery reflections of the town of Verteuil that gives some of the sense of magic to the scene. It's a funny word, magic, isn't it? But in fact, what Monet does is weave a sort of spell, pulling you closer and closer inside the experience of being there, so you start seeing and feeling the things he did. Whilst they were still at Verteuil, Camille died. Then Monet and Alice, with their combined family, moved to a big old house with a huge garden, Giverny. It was fantastic. Big enough for all of them. They were all involved in the garden, planting, pressing flowers, digging and even harvesting, all the way from little Michael and Jean-Pierre to gentle Suzanne, who was one of Monet's favourite models, to Blanche, who was Monet's pupil and who eventually became an artist herself. Find an arm of Seine at Giverny. This was painted from Monet's floating studio. It's the first one where Monet uses the water almost as a mirror for the sky. How does this glassy stillness make you feel?